Big decision made by the governor of Arizona appointing Jon Kyl to the Senate seat. Brings a lot to the table. Joining us now is Mike Noble with OH Predictive Insights. What do you make of this pick?
I think it's a pick that checks, frankly, all the boxes when it's really tough to check all the boxes in this current political environment. Not only does Jon Kyl, he was ranked one of the most conservative senators while he served. Also, he was named Time Magazine's top 10 most liked senators. And then, of course, you look at his stances that he's actually worked across the aisle, on immigration reform. So he's showing a bit of that compromising. He checks all the conservative boxes for the base, and then also he has, a track record of, just being kind of lower profile and, again, more of a workhorse.
Now, as a pollster, and when you talk about checking the boxes, as a pollster, when you look at things like this, I looked at it from a standpoint, I didn't think Jon Kyl would go back. I thought he was happy in private life. For him to go back is a testament, I think, to John McCain and the legacy, but also the necessity, because this is the first time in Arizona, as long as I've been here, that these seats are going to be open, with Jeff Flake leaving, McCain passing away. So it's a whole different landscape, isn't it?
Oh, correct. I think the timing of this, the timing is about similar as the timing of when Halley's Comet flies around. And so right now we look at this unprecedented time, but also we need someone with senior leadership in there. Being the former Senate Majority Whip, second highest position, is that you need someone that can find where the bathroom is. And Arizona needs that representation. So it's frankly someone so unique. And then looking at that polling, it's a very tough one, is that you got to keep your Trump base of supporter, the hard right folks, the conservatives. However, you still need to win over those all-important moderate or independent swing voters, which currently the GOP is not doing very well with due to the factor of Trump and the factor of top issue.
I think what helps him as well is, like you said, with the independent voters, because Jon Kyl, as conservative as he is and the base loves him. I mean, the president tweeted out how great it is to have Jon Kyl there, but also the fact that he was such a, he did the hard work of the water rights, the Native American work. So he knows the business of Arizona walking in. So he knows what needs to be done.
Absolutely. I mean, John McCain was definitely more, getting into the fights and really being kind of out in front of things. But Jon Kyl had a reputation when people had questions about policy. He was always behind the scenes, really working diligently, which is, can be a thankless job. However, it's someone that definitely gets things done. But I'd say also he was very big social conservative, which is a huge box to check as well. Big on pro-life and also traditional marriage, which plays well with the Republicans.
How odd now with the fight that's going on with the hearings for Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court, that Jon Kyl was such a steadfast member of the Judiciary Committee and even talked about as a Supreme Court nominee at one time.
Yeah, that's interesting how that landed up working out, and how they'll end up voting. I'm not really sure where they'll go, but we do know that he was definitely very instrumental in pushing Kavanaugh forward. But time will tell of how he's going to end up voting.
So the impression, because really outside of Arizona it doesn't matter as much, but in the election years that are going on, how important is it to have a Jon Kyl in there now with the fight that's going on for the other Senate seat between Kyrsten Sinema and Martha McSally?
It's huge, because if you were to put someone in there that would alienate the base or also alienate those middle of the ground voters, it would put you in a much tougher spot. And I think right now the GOP has finally realized the tough environment we're in. However, it's not so tough that they can mitigate it and weather through it, but you have to make changes. And I think, though, just Kyl in general, he checks all the boxes from being close with McCain to conservative and the Trump folks, and also with that general election. So in general, he really does a great job in all those areas.
How important to the voters will it be for a Jon Kyl to either endorse or support McSally? Because this is going to be a tough fight for her.
I don't know if he's really going to get very involved, because John, he served for 18 years or 3 terms. He never really had much of a trouble getting reelected. He was overall very well liked, and he really kept his head down compared to kind of some more controversial figures. And so I would say that he, I don't see him really getting too involved. I think he's doing it because of his relationship with McCain in Arizona. There's really no one else that has that leadership that can go in there and actually, know the process and run through it. So I think that, he's stepping in for now, and then he's going to decide in January whether or not he continues forward or stays. But one thing's for certain, I don't think he was seeking the job.
No, and that's the other interesting part about it, is that for me, he was the one no-brainer on the list. And when he said yes, I thought it was just an easy one. But for him to stay, let's say he stays until 2020, it should be interesting to see that landscape in 2 years running for that seat again is going to be just as crazy as this past race, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. In general, when you look at one, I don't believe He will most likely not seek re-election because, again, I think he's just serving his country right now in this tough time. But I think that you're going to see a massive race because anytime you have open Senate seats, I mean, they're just extremely rare to come by. I mean, Kyle held his seat for 18 years. You had McCain had his for about 30. And so when you look at that, folks that are looking to step up, we're going to have no shortage of candidates.
Absolutely. Well, Mike Noble's going to stay with us. He's also the chief pollster. He is the managing partner at OH at Predictive Insights. Talk about fake polling and how polls can be misleading. That's coming up in a minute. Stick around. Joined by Mike Noble. He is the chief pollster for OH Predictive Insights, and pretty good track record.
Yeah, so far we started the company 2 years and 3 months ago, and so in 2016, when historically it was a year pollsters got it wrong, we were 8 for 8 on elections called, and also we called a special election in Arizona's 8th district, which are notoriously tough to call. Nailed that. Then also in the primary, we nailed 2 more, so now we're 11 for 11. So good, really good track record thus far.
So when you look at the polls that are out, I was talked about this on the radio show this week, that there is a poll, a headline, AZ Central, dead heat in the governor's race. But then when you read the data and the polling that's in the story, it says that it was a company that was hired by the Garcia campaign. How much does that factor into those numbers?
It's a huge factor because which internal campaign would have released numbers showing them either not in a close race or down? And of course, when you can't see what their sample is, I mean, polling is only accurate if you ask the right people the right questions. And so we don't know, and PPP has a bit of a track record being a little left-leaning. So I would be extremely suspect of any of those numbers, and frankly, I was surprised that they actually published it.
And it's interesting, the headline is what grabs your attention, dead heat. They are honest about the polling in the body of the story.
Correct. And when you look at, it's interesting is that you look at Arizona Republic, they partnered up with ASU last year, and they put out a poll on the presidential race. It was interesting, I actually ended up doing an interview about it, how all of there was 5 polls put out, one being theirs. All of us were right next to each other within a point or so. They landed up being an outlier about 5 points out. When you looked at their sample, to look at the likely electorate sample, we have more Republicans than Democrats. They had double the amount of Democrats than Republicans, and they justified it by just waiting it out, which is fine. However, you have such a small number of Republicans, and which landed them being an outlier, but they still ended up publishing it anyways. Frankly, I would have scrapped it and just got a new sample. But so just looking at some of the past track record, it's been a little suspect.
When you look at the landscape in Arizona, the voting landscape, and I've talked about this often, that the independent-minded voters, whether they're registered for a party or registered as independent, but they vote, they're not necessarily tied to a party.
Correct.
They're usually the people that decide the election. How does Martha McSally keep her base, but explain to those moderate voters that she's the one that represents them best?
Well, so this is the unique trick about the election, if you're a Republican running, of how you can find success in November, is that you have to hold your Trump base. So you cannot run from Trump by any means. If not, you have no path to victory. So you have to keep your Trump base and then also still brand yourself independently of the GOP, so have your kind of own unique persona or personality. And so I think that's what you're seeing with the first initial ads of McSally kind of framing herself of, hey, I was out there fighting, taking out terrorists while, Senate was protesting in a pink tutu. So you see kind of that contrast, and I think, that's where you have to go in this race to ultimately find victory in November.
So whether it's the governor's race where you've got David Garcia saying that the border strike force is kind of a charade and a fear tactic, and the governor big support, McSally going to say, I'm a veteran, and she's a patriot versus protester. That's the way she has to identify.
Absolutely. That's what you're seeing in her race. And then with the Ducey race, it's interesting is that when you look at it, they say it's dead heat, but one thing, Ducey always is never short for cash. They're extremely good when it comes to their political operation and their messaging. And so when you look at once that's spent, I think the RJA has already reserved $9 million in attack ads. And I know the GOP is in a tough year, but I don't believe it's that tough that we're going to see a progressive Democrat elected as the next governor of Arizona.
When you look at what affects voters, is it the hit piece ads, those negative ads? Is it polling data that comes out? What's most effective in engaging a voter to listen to your message?
So there's a couple things out with voters, right? One is that typically the messaging will be targeted to the folks that are very likely to vote. So the ones, if you voted in the last 4 elections, you can expect you're going to get people showing up at your door all the time. You're going to get a lot of phone calls, mail, and everything in between compared to folks that less of a propensity. And so I think messaging-wise is that definitely in the larger races, broadcasts, so TV, radio. So definitely TV ads. You're going to see heavy spending. We're going to see the most spending ever spent in the history of Arizona on any race in this Senate contest coming up. And so I would say when it comes to moving the needle and negative, it definitely works. I mean, that's why they run it, because it's seeding doubt. Trying to run a full positive campaign while someone's running negative, it's tough. And you saw that with McCain and Bush when they were in that primary for president. They were really duking it out in South Carolina, and then McCain made the choice that he wanted to go all positive and stay above the fray and not dive down deeper, and ultimately land up losing winning the nomination, but again, that was a choice he made.
About 30 seconds left. You want to go on a limb with either one of these two races, governor's race and then the Senate race? Are you ready to predict a winner yet, or is it way too early?
Well, you never know what factors could come into play. But based on right now, I would say definitely the advantage is to the incumbent Governor Doug Ducey. I really don't see much out there that's really going to change that as of today. But then you look at Senate. That's a true toss-up. I mean, I think it's truly toss-up. It's really going to be of that you have such a short time and having to pivot on the issues, is that one small mistake could really make a significant difference. As we know, Senate's a 6-year term.
All right, he's Mike Noble, and he is 8 for what, 11 for 11 right now. So hopefully between now and November, let's see if we keep it that way. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back.